Hey everybody, I wanted this video to come out during April because it's Autism Acceptance Month, but it's midnight of May 1st. I failed you. So before I get into like the specific behaviors of like some autistic people, because everyone is different, um, just like four little disclaimers, like things to know basically about like anybody. So first thing is autism doesn't have a look. Like everybody just looks like anybody else. Like people I've heard confuse autism with stuff like Down syndrome or something that like actually has like a physical effect on your appearance. But like that's not what autism is. You can maybe notice it like from how people act, maybe, but like just from their face or like how their body looks, there's no indicator that someone is autistic just from that. Yeah. Number two, autism is a neurological and genetic condition. So like there's no outside force. Again, another misconception I have mentioned that like some people out there think that it's similar to like getting a head injury and then having cognitive disabilities from that, but that's not what autism is either. And of course, we have the infamous anti vaxxers. Now, listen, there are reasons to be skeptical of vaccines, sure, but not because of autism, which is like the main thing that people seem to be concerned about, which is like that's no correlation. Not at all. Vaccines have caused infertility in certain groups of women. Um, Recently, I actually saw some people talking about how the corona vaccine, I mean, there are many of them, I don't know which one, but like made their periods last longer. It, it mostly affects women because I guess people aren't testing their vaccines on women, it's just men. That's a sexism right there. But yeah. So yeah, people who are anti-vax because of like the fear of autism are those people are fully stupid. But I'm also not out here trying to say like get your vaccines or you're an evil person because like it is very important to question authority. Like in any case about anything. So yeah. Another thing people seem to have misconceptions of is that they have to use person first language when talking about autistic people. Now, person first language means saying a person before like a trait of that person. So, for example, when I first saw this idea going around that you have to use person first language, it was on Tumblr. It was a post like instead of saying a mentally ill person, you would say a person with mental illness, which, like, sure, I guess. Okay. But with autism, it's like an illness is something that you're not born with, right? So it's not comparable to like autism. Like I'm not talking about like just mental illness, but like any illness. Um, so yeah, and also when it's something like autism, which is like innate, like you, like it's part of you, you wouldn't apply that person first logic to like another trait of like that's part of you, right? Like you wouldn't say a person with whiteness or like with blackness or like also like even if it's something that isn't innate like a religion, like you wouldn't say a person with Christianity or like a person with atheism. Like that just sounds weird, dude. And it applies to that too because like a religion is part of somebody's identity or lack of religion, whatever. um, it's not like an affliction or something. And now that I just thought of this, but I feel like that whole you have to say person with autism instead of autistic person, I feel like that mindset kind of came about because like people use autistic as an insult. So like to say person with autism instead of autistic, it's like seeing them as a person and not an insult, which is just we're not going to unpack all that right now. Okay. So the last kind of like objective thing that's like applies to any autistic person is functioning labels, which personally, I get why functioning labels are a thing, but like before functioning labels, there was like kind of a scale of like you're like have worse autism or like mild autism, which like that's not a thing. Like that makes it also sound like some kind of disease or something. And I get that back then people didn't know much about autism and they didn't actually listen to autistic people, which is like not relevant to like the times or anything. It's just an issue all on its own. But nowadays, there's no excuse to like use outdated and just straight up incorrect terms like that. Because implying that someone has worse autism than others is like, it implies, oh, I just knocked something over. It implies pain, suffering, if you have like a worse fever or like a mild fever, it's like, yeah. So, just another like kind of general disclaimer to anybody who doesn't know. Autism itself, like being autistic, does not hurt a person at all. It doesn't like kill anybody. It doesn't cause autistic people like inherent pain. Every pain that autistic people experience comes from the outside. Like, they may be more sensitive to it, they may have more, like, what you'd call extreme reactions to it, but anyway, back to the whole, like, functioning label thing. It is true that some people, like, function better in society than others, like autistic people, I mean. I mean, that goes for any people too, but I'm talking about autistic people here, duh. Um, and that's because everybody who is autistic is equally autistic. It's just that some of us have more energy and, like, social awareness to blend in more and, like, be able to adapt. That's another thing about autism that I'm pretty sure all autistic people experience, is that doing anything is just, like, exhausting. Like, I don't know if that's because of, like, just everything around us being too loud and wearing us down, or if autism itself is just, like, an energy draining experience. But, yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, basically everybody who's autistic is also diagnosed with depression, so that's probably where the energy draining thing comes from. Basically, we live in a society. Okay, so first, like, thing that is different with every autistic person, but is a misconception, is that autistic people don't have emotions or, like, have less emotions. That's not true. Um, we just tend to, like, not express our emotions the same, or, like, depending on the situation. Like, for example, I watched a sad anime one time, called Clannad, if you know it, tears all day, you know? But, when I was watching a really sad part, one of the most famous parts, I was, like, with a group of friends eating lunch in high school, watching one of the most famous sad scenes on my iPod, so they couldn't see what I was watching, but they could see me, so I'm like, okay, I'm just not gonna cry then. Because, like, it's not that I, like, can exactly control my crying, but for me it's easier to, like, control it when it's just, like, a movie or something, especially when people are looking at me. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna cry in front of people. Who am I, a child? Pfft, only children cry, am I right? But on the other hand, when I'm alone and I can, like, just act however I want, um, like, if anything sad happens, I'll just, like, cry if I feel like it. Not that I'll just cry at anything sad, but, like, an example is one time I was watching Kuroko no Basket, and one character was, like, sad because he'd lost a game, he was so tired, he worked so hard, and he couldn't even stand up at the end. I was like, oh my god, my heart. I didn't even, like, connect with the characters that much, but just that, I was, like, ruined. Like, anime was a mistake, dude. But a real life example is, on Halloween, I had shaved my head. I was going to be Hellraiser guy. I don't know if he has a name in the movie, but, like, the fan name for him is Pinhead. You know him? Yeah. Um, so I was doing my makeup in the middle of the day. I was planning to see a movie because, like, it's not like we can party with Corona or whatever. And the theater had, like, the guidelines and whatever, all, like, restrictions and seating plans and everything. Like, it was fine. But, I'm in the middle of doing my makeup, and I get a call from my mom, and she says that, my grandpa died. So I was like, oh, okay. And, like, I was like, if I cry, I'm gonna, like, ruin my makeup. I'm, like, I have no energy to redo it. I'm just like, I just gotta get it done, get out there, see that movie, and then once my parents come over, we'll deal with all that stuff later. And, like, to neurotypical, I can't speak. To neurotypical people that might sound insensitive and, like, OMG, you're, like, care more about, like, your fun time than, like, your grandpa just died, dude. But it's like, he's already dead. I can't change that. Like, I might as well have a few hours of fun before we have to deal with the sad shit, you know? Okay, next thing, sensory overload. So sensory overload is a thing when there's just, like, too much going on, and you just have to, like, just take a break and avoid it. And, like, for a lot of people, like, especially with kids, like, the main idea of sensory overload is, like, loud noises and people talking to you too much, and you're like, just like, I need a moment to chill, man. But I recently learned that it also means, like, if you've just been exerting too much energy in general, like, for me, being a depressed piece of shit, doing housework, and, like, even just going to the gym once a day with my support worker person, it's, like, mentally exhausting, and it's like, yeah, and after a few days of that, like, the weekend is just, like, a time where I just chill, like, I cannot do anything. Yeah. Okay, next is stimming, and to an extent everybody does this, like, it's little things like fidgeting, playing with your hair, tapping your feet, stuff like that, but a lot of autistic people, like, have, like, toys to play with, like fidget spinners before they got hijacked by the memes. I hate it. Anyway, for me, I don't really stim much, like outside of like a usual neurotypical level, I guess. At least I can't think of anything. I know I do like love texture and like mostly like fuzzy plushies and stuff. And like, oh, my grandma is so annoying for this, but she's all like, why don't you like animals? They feel the same as stuffies. No, they do not. Don't lie to me. I don't want to feel something moving and breathing and like blood in there. Being an actual living thing, gross. Get it away from me. Okay, next is meltdowns, and to like a neurotypical person, a meltdown might just look like a tantrum, just like crying because you don't get what you want or whatever, or screaming because for me meltdowns come from like mostly anger. I don't know if that's the case for every autistic person. I think a lot of people like have meltdowns when they like basically any kind of upset, I guess. But for me, the worst meltdown I had, caused by the most aggravating sort of thing, is when. So, I was talking to my parents. I was feeling like my grandma, the same grandma from before, wasn't treating me like a person, basically. She saw me as like something to be like fixed or like just a burden on like everything. And so I was like, hey, parents, can you like maybe do her and educate, you know? Like, kind of maybe say, hey, that's normal for autistic people, and if she's like having a bad time, it's because of people around her, which the only person around her is you, so. So my parents called her, and they talked to her while I was downstairs in the basement. She was upstairs, and I was like, okay, so maybe this is gonna be a thing. But then, like, I was kind of half listening. But then I heard her talking about me in like a really annoyed way, and I was like, okay, I can tell she's not talking to my parents anymore because like just she mentioned them by name, and I was like, she's not talking to them. So I went upstairs. She's talking to my uncle about like how basically everything just the same, like she has to put up with me and she's the one suffering from me being around, and it's like fuck that, man. And I just like lost it. I and she like held up the phone to me. She was like, let him hear what you have to say about me, and I'm like, fuck yeah, I will. Because like that's so fucked up, man. And yeah, it just was a time. And like usually, like I don't really talk that much to relatives outside of my like direct family and like grandparents usually, so it's like it was probably a weird time for him to hear me like yelling like that, but like I did not give a fuck in the moment. I was so angry. Yeah, we've since made up, but not really because she like still doesn't get it. But like whatever. I didn't feel bad for yelling, but I did feel bad for like some of the things I said specifically, which like wasn't a lot. Like mostly I pointed out valid things, but it was a time. Okay, next thing, masking. Masking is a defense mechanism used by autistic people to look neurotypical and like to blend in, basically. A lot of people like explain this by using an example of like imagine you're on a different planet and you're like an alien on a new planet and you're just trying to like blend in. But I find that kind of dehumanizing, so instead I'm gonna go with an example of like imagine you're a fugitive in like an enemy country or something and you're trying not to give yourself away that you're like different or bad or whatever. And for me, not being diagnosed with autism until I was like 18, I basically masked my entire like school life. Like people thought it was anxiety or like social anxiety, but like I acted like normal or whatever, as in like me normal, around like my family and stuff. Okay, last thing I don't really hear a lot of people talking about, but like I feel it a lot, is that autistic people, some of them, we don't always have the best spatial awareness, you know? Like, I suck at like measuring things, like how tall somebody is compared to somebody else. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head if somebody I know is taller than me or not. Or like, also like, that's why a lot of autistic people don't drive. Some do. I don't. Just because I would not be able to tell like where I am in space. And same with like physical activity. I walk weird because I don't know what a body is or whatever. I don't know. But also when I'm doing like specific like physical things where it's like a certain yoga pose or something, I like can't feel in like the space like where my leg is, for example, if it's like up or something. If that makes sense. Like it's hard, man. What our bodies just flesh cages for our souls. Uh, so yeah, that's it for this video. Hopefully I'll have some more art related content soon. See ya.